Hello, Internet family. This is Anjanette Potter, also known as Adam's Red, and you are listening to Fridays Live at Midnight. So Fridays Live at midnight is a live stream that I like to do every other Friday when I'm not doing the Eclectic Music Geek podcast. So I've been seeing a lot of stuff like on YouTube with some of the people that I follow and online, and it's interesting. So of course, I'm sure you guys know about the article in Psychology Today that is talking about how there are all these lonely men out here. I'm gonna go ahead and see if I can turn this on. If I can't, I'll just talk about it. So, because it looks like my laptop isn't wanting to turn on and I don't feel like turning it on. So, they made the point of saying that even though men can live without companionship, they tend, in their later years, they tend to do better when they have a companion, which unfortunately, they really don't have the same thing to say for women. And so women are kind of every woman that I, connected with kind of looked at the article and was like, yeah. And I was amongst them. And I will tell you why. Um, I also this week discovered yet another derogatory term that is aimed at women. And it's something about a woman, So I looked it up because I'm like, okay, what is post wall? Because I have no clue what that is. Because I don't keep up with all of the latest terms, especially when you're talking about derogatory terms. So I guess post wall is a woman who is past childbearing age. And considered no longer attractive. Now, as much as some of these little mugs run around here worrying about people calling them deadbeats and worrying about women and this, that, and the other, I would think that a woman past childbearing age would be ideal since, y'all act like anybody asking you to acknowledge a child and doing what you are supposed to be doing is somehow either trying to be white, which I think is ridiculous, or asking for too much. For whatever reason, they're just asking for too much. I would think that a woman past childbearing years would be ideal for you. There's no danger of getting her pregnant. Well, my grandmother was a change of life baby. So, I saw a couple of people who are kind of team me. So, they sitting home. They're like, nope, foregoing a hookup in favor of staying home and eating some pizza. Now, sometimes staying home. Let me say this as a person who used to club back in the day. Sometimes my stay at homes were worth it because sometimes you need a little break from the usual crowd that shows up clubbing. Okay, the ones that want to, I saw where my daughter went out with one of her friends. My daughter's in a committed relationship, so I'm not worried about her. Okay, she is not, on none of this mess that's out here. So before I had talked a little bit about men and commitment and, all of, so tonight I really want to discuss men, commitment, and all of these little labels that guys want to give women. First of all, labeling a woman all these things is really the equivalent, excuse me, of verbal abuse. Now, Steve Harvey has something called the 90-day rule, which is waiting for 90 days before you have sex with someone to see if they're right for you. Which since I'm a born again Christian, I'm already on the till marriage rule. So I already don't, I'm already not indulging anyone. If we're not legally married, you don't get no pussy. I'm not a prostitute. I am somebody's future wife. And I don't really, it's bad enough when young guys are annoying. What's really bad is when older guys are annoying. Okay? And so, and I'm like, that must have come out of the Kevin Samuels camp. Because, for this man to be so-called doing the work of the Lord, I have never heard. I remember one time belonging to a church, and I remember praying about some of the stuff that was going on, and it was like the Holy Spirit was like, well, for people who are supposed to be following God and supposed to be encouraging one another, they have an awful lot of derogatory terms for women. And I'm just kind of going through some of these channels that I see. So they have an awful lot of derogatory terms. And it sounds like, some of the stuff that I used to hear out of a denomination whose two pastors were out of their background. And they're constantly saying nasty things about women. So post-wall is another term that has been made up that is meant to undermine your sense of security about yourself. It's another way to tear at women's self-esteem. It's another way to tear at your sense of self-worth. And it's another way to make you feel bad about yourself. So why would someone want to make you feel bad about yourself? They want you to feel bad about yourself because you're not giving in to whatever little stupid demands that they're trying to place on you. Okay? So let's say you want to be found by a man that is hardworking. Maybe he, he's working. A family guy. And I'm also going to talk about this whole thing of categories. Someone showed up in my YouTube stream and they talked about, the categorization of women for dating dates all the way back to blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, if you don't shut your messed up face up. Now, it's one thing I hate for men. I am not a prostitute. I am not a co-conspirator. When I see men do ridiculous things to women, I do not participate. And there's no amount of money you can pay me to get me to help you pump and dump somebody or set somebody up. And it's terrible. And it's one thing for you to do it, and it's just your social life and you do it. What's really bad is What's really bad is when a pastor in his denomination get together and decide to set women up. And people do set women up. Guys set women up. When you hear about women being ran through at parties, that's a bunch of guys that got together and decided that was going to happen. And what they typically do is make sure that that particular woman is too drunk to resist them. Now, I think around the late 80s, early 90s, it finally became illegal to rape women who are passed out or unconscious. And I'm bringing this up because many times guys do get together and conspire against women. So the whole putting women in categories is a way to make sure to groom you into being okay with the man that you love messing around with some other woman other than you. It's another way to get away with sleeping with you and another woman. Because typically these guys are not saving it. Okay? Typically guys like this are not living a Christian life and they're not saving it. And they can be any color. Okay? So many times when you're hearing these terms, it's, like I said, verbal abuse. It's another way to tear away at your self-esteem. It's another way to lower your sense of self-esteem. It's another way of making you feel bad about yourself. And it's really a lie of the devil. Okay? So if God is not telling any man that you are post-wall. God is not telling any other woman that I posted this week and I talked about a woman coming into a group that I was in on Facebook and saying, "Oh, you're a side piece because you don't deserve to be a wife." And I called it a lie of the devil. Just like I'm calling post-wall a lie of the devil. If it's to get you to, if it's an attempt to draw you into sexual sin, then chances are it is a lie. Even if you are menopausal, the guys saying it are usually too young for you to fool with in the first place. Okay, I left a church just recently, and one of the things that the Holy Spirit kept giving me clues about was the fact that they seem to be involved in human trafficking. Okay, like I said before, I'm not a Trump follower. I don't do none of that. I'm pretty much liberal in my politics. Now, being liberal does not mean I agree with everything that I feel like the left is doing. They have stuff going on that I'm not really on board with either. But I tend to lean left because I feel like left tends to have black people's best interests, which are usually the interests of the working class, in mind. I've never felt like the right cared about us at all. And they keep showing that with different things that they're doing. Pretty much outlawing abortion. I just recently looked and saw where it seems like they are starting to try to roll back the clock on voting rights. Okay, which means on voting rights, and you can look at the whole voting suppression thing that it looks like they're trying to do. So I had to leave 2 of them. And you may have, if you're following me on, social media anywhere, you saw where I have called a particular denomination the devil. Now, let me explain why I'm calling them the devil. In Christianity, you're either following Christ or you're following Satan. There's no middle ground when it comes to whether or not you are considered to be following God or the devil. So if the Word of God says that the only place that we're to abstain from sexual sin, anybody that's trying to get you to sin is of the devil. Okay? Anybody that's trying to use you for sex is of the devil. So the reason I say that some of these folks that are talking about post-wall, which I'm like, if you're a guy who's in his 50s, you really don't have any room to be talking about women over the age of 35. Okay, because you post-wall your damn self. And what do you think you have to offer any woman except money? If you have any of that. So it just really amazes me. It really amazes me the number of guys who will just repeat shit just to be repeated. It sounds good, so let me go repeat it. But what gets me is the number of women that'll be right on board with this and not realize, okay, this may not be directly affecting you, but it's going to affect somebody that you care about. So if you watch and when I say this, if you watch the R. Kelly documentary, Surviving R. Kelly, which I suggest you watch. Okay. One thing a former pastor of mine used to say, and unfortunately he was always aiming at other people and not himself, was that the truth is not afraid to be examined. Okay? If you're a true R. Kelly fan, then you don't have no problem watching it and hearing what people are saying about your little perverted leader. Okay? I find it interesting when people just want to blindly follow someone and don't want to do the homework on that person. So I remember when the whole thing went down with him and the tape on the teenage girl, and she was very young. I remember when that whole thing went down. I remember when the marriage to Aaliyah was going down. Now, girls being underage and marrying, I'm not going to say that's not a big deal because it is. I remember my mom telling me about it, and they found, telling me about the marriage to Aaliyah thing. And I thought, okay, not cool. But then when I heard about the tape with the underage girl, and the number of people, the number of comedians who made it became joke fodder. The number of, and I mean, there was jokes all over the place. Okay? The number of people who made jokes about it, the number of people who saw it. I didn't see it. Now, from number one, I'm not going to try to make myself more noble than I am. I had an issue with pornography during that time, so I was trying to stay delivered. Number one, and, if you've ever had to deal with situations like that, that watching one time can lead you into watching a whole bunch of other mess. So I didn't want to fool with it. Number two, I cannot watch Nothing that has to do, and from what I was told, she, looked underage. It's not like she looked more mature for her age or anything like that. She looked like an underage girl. I don't do child porn. I don't watch nobody's child porn. I don't like watching nothing involving underage girls. I follow this one Facebook group, and they were talking about, at one point they were saying, have any man ever asked a woman what age she was the first time a grown man came onto her? The average age of street harassment for a young woman is 12 years old. And I'm talking about grown men. I'm not talking about another 12-year-old boy flirting with you. I'm talking about grown men flirting with women that they see, with girls that they see on the street that they know are not old enough for them to be fooling with sexually. Okay? The average age of street harassment is 12. Now, that's a figure that I believe. And I believe it because I, at one point, was a 12-year-old. And I can remember men who looked old enough to be my grandfather saying inappropriate things to me or flirting with me at 12. Right. Now, if you are a man and this description fits you, you should feel ashamed to be picking on anybody underage. I think it's horrible that there are men out there that think it's okay to say inappropriate things or come on to 12-year-olds. So, hearing all of this, and I guess one of his little prisoners is now engaged to him and carrying his baby. One thing I can say, when you are a young woman, there are plenty of opportunities to completely mess up your life. One thing youth affords you is opportunities to completely destroy your life. And unfortunately, along with those opportunities come plenty of men, plenty of grown men that are willing to help you accomplish that task. Because some men, especially those who abuse, derive a sick, twisted pleasure from finding ways to mess up your goals and mess up your dreams. Okay? I have invented a term for such men, and they're called shadow men. So now, a shadow man, and some of them, I know we have plenty of them in my family, they're the guys who come into your family and do a lot of damage and then head on out as though they've never existed. The damage can be illegitimate babies. It can be molestation. It can be rape. It can be just flat out physical abuse. But if you ask somebody who the man is, nobody seems to know their names or want to give up any names. They're not men that you can really put a face on unless you decide to go and put a face on them. But like, it's like you don't see their presence, you don't know their name, you have a hard time putting a face on any of them. But one thing is clear, you can definitely see the damage that they have left in their wake. I am sick of such men. And it doesn't matter what color the woman is. Okay? These men who want to leave babies but don't want to take care of them. I just recently saw a thing on my YouTube where where someone was talking about people beating child support raps or whatever. Now, there are some people who belong to the denomination that I used to be with. And there seems to be this thing of helping men beat child support raps here lately. Okay? Mm-hmm. Defending deadbeats. I'm not defending no man that don't take care of their kids. But it just seems to be a thing here lately where there's a lot of men beating child support raps or trying to, and they're doing so with the help of their church and their pastors. So it's something to think about. Like I said, all these categories, the categories are just meant to groom you into being okay with your husband sleeping with another person while he sleeps with you. Okay? You're being groomed. We are slowly being groomed. Now, I personally don't deal with the category mess at all. You approach me and you're rude, you just gonna go home empty-handed. That's just how that's gonna work. Okay? I'm a born again Christian woman. I am a wife in waiting. I am a future wife to the right man. And if are not that man, or you are showing me stuff that says that you're not that man, well, I'm just not gonna deal. Or you act like blah blah, you act like your pussy is made of gold. It is. As far as I'm concerned, it is. Not only is it made of gold, it is too good for you. I saw a girl posting something, and she said somebody that wants some wet but can't pay your bills. The answer is no. I was like, this is me in regards to men who want it and don't want to be married. The answer is no. Oof. I told y'all about the whole taming of the shrew thing. I'm not gonna say it's midnight when it's noon. Just because you just because you say it's noon. That ain't gonna happen. I'm not about to be that woman. Like I said before. And so anyway, I was talking about the Steve Harvey thing, and I just went right off script. So Steve Harvey talks about the 90-day rule. I have a rule, and it's called a 90-second rule. So my 90-second rule, if you can't have a 90-second conversation without bringing up sex, or insulting me in some kind of way, or saying something inappropriate, or saying something crazy, you don't pass muster. You gotta go. So to me, that whole post-wall thing, nope. If you call me a prostitute, nope. Acting entitled at all, nope. So I said, acting entitled at all. We're supposed to, if I go out with you, or if I deal with you at all, first of all, if I choose to deal with you at all, because there's some of y'all that don't even go take women out on dates anymore. It's almost like, well, let me see how much I can get away with and still stay your man. Nothing. Period. You know, like I said before, I'm just like, what in the world? It seems like that little Kevin Samuels, I'm like, good Lord. And I wouldn't say that I'm glad he's dead, but it's like ever since he has been gone, some of you men act like you are losing your mind. I'm going to put a little term out here in Christianity, and it's called idolatry. So, you know what it is to have an idol, okay? An idol is something that you worship in place of God. Now, it's already bad enough that I feel like a lot of women are giving into a lot of idolatrous spirits out here as far as some of the men that they're following. There are some things that are false teachings. So the reason I call the group that I call the devil is because their teachings are false. Okay? If you are teaching women that in order for them to be saved, that a condition of them being saved is for the right man to pick them for marriage, you are guilty of idolatry. We are saved by grace through faith in Jesus Christ. None of these men out here are the author and finisher of your faith. When you accept Christ, you become a new creature. The Word of God says that I am a new creature because I have accepted Christ. When I accept Christ, my sins are forgiven. So God is not, determining your sense of worth. Your sense of worth is determined by your relationship with Jesus Christ, not whether or not some little bonehead guy out here is picking you. Okay, so not only are their teachings false, I also came across a whole lot of sexual sin. And one thing that Steve Harvey said in one of his books that I pretty much treat like the Bible, and that is, a man knows what he wants with you when he approaches you. That goes for preachers as well. So where you see a false, where you see a false, where you see a false teaching, just know that was something that pastor intended to do in order to lead you in a wrong direction. And usually if they're trying to lead you in a wrong direction, they have a reason for it. So I was looking at this thing on this channel called the Illuminati, and she does MLMs and, exposes different things. And so she was talking about the Dugars. So, the Dugars is the people who had like 20 kids or whatever and had a show on TLC. And one of the young men, molested his sister and has gotten into more trouble since they have been off the air or whatever. So she dug into their pastor. And so their pastor was also got into trouble for assaulting some young ladies at his church. Now, one of the things he was doing, and I thought it was interesting, simply because I had a pastor try it with me. So, some of the young ladies, he would divert the young men that would have been, an appropriate age to be dating them. He would divert them someplace else and try to keep them, sheltered away from the guys. And he would do it because he was trying to get at these women himself. Now, I went through a similar situation, except that they were not trying to, one of the pastors was trying to get, several of the pastors was trying to get at me himself. But not only that, they were basically trying to pimp me. Okay? let me say this, even if you have been a prostitute in your past, once you accept Christ, you have a clean slate. God is not telling any man to call you a prostitute. God is not telling any man that it is okay for them to pump and dump you. God is not trying to get you to divest from your own racial community. Whatever you decide to do as far as you dating whomever, it's up between you and God, pretty much, or you and that person and God. So the person, like I said, cults like interracial marriage. And one of the reasons why cults like interracial marriage is because, accepting those that the people around you may not accept or still got hang-ups about is a good way to make you look welcoming. It's meant to generate an atmosphere of being really welcoming to those that are usually not welcome everywhere else. And to be perfectly honest with you, it's really false. But unfortunately, it's kind of an indictment on some of the churches within the Christian faith, because if we weren't quite as polarized, things are getting better, but there's still a lot of polarization, and especially between black and white. And if some of our churches weren't so polarizing and weren't so segregated along the lines of color, then nobody teaching a false narrative would be able to get in with any mess. Now, that's just something to ponder on. I'm not a person who believes that interracial marriage is the cure-all to everything that goes on out here, because it's enough for people who are married and they're married to the same color to make a marriage work in this. You really truly need God to make a marriage work, no matter what color the participants are. Marriage is work, not tedious work. It depends on who you're married to. But, I see people having arguments over stuff, and I'm like, why is that an argument? Right. So, I've been sitting here looking at some old episodes of Everybody Hates Chris. And so that was one of my favorite shows when it was on, but the dynamic between his parents cracked me up, because it really shows you the breakdown that happens when we don't know how to communicate properly. Okay? Now, this is not anything, because I think the characters are based on, Chris Rock's actual life and different people that he knew. And so the father always cracks me up, because I grew up looking at work uniforms. Like, I grew up looking at those uniforms that he wears, around there. My uncles worked for different, most of my family was working class. So I grew up seeing a lot of work uniforms growing up, depending on who they worked for and everything. So the whole thing of nickel and diming the family to death, I remember, I don't remember it, depends on which uncle you're talking about, because they're not uniform. But I think when people don't realize what it takes to, financially to support a family, to make sure that everything is done. And me being a single mom, I pretty much had to do both roles. I had to be the provider. I also had to be the mother. And it's not an easy job. Like I was saying recently, looking at it, I'm like, at least she had a husband that had 2 jobs, and I've seen plenty of women, all colors, that had that, thing where if things wasn't going right at work, they're, well, I don't really need this job because my husband got 2 jobs. during my children's rearing, was never able to say that. Okay. So I was the one working and taking care of things. So I had to fight. So if something wasn't going right at work, my response would have to be, well, here's 2 weeks notice. Or some other ones. I never had that cushion of being able to say my husband got 2 jobs, so I don't have to put up with this. And I think it makes a difference. This coming Monday, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But it makes a difference. Like, it makes a real difference. And I was like, shoot, at least she was able to say that. many women, and especially a lot of Black women, when I was, raising my children, we didn't have that ability to say that. We weren't able to say that. That's why I think it's ironic when I hear these men talk about women looking for a man to take care of them. And I'm like, and from where? Who's taking care of us? Who is taking care of us? Who is doing all of that? I remember leaving a church one time, and it was because, there was a whole lot of stuff going on there, and it was just time to go. But one of the things, so I think they were considering me for the pastor's brother at one point when it comes to marriage. And so I don't know, it seemed like they got stuck on this thing of accusing me of looking for a man to take care of me. Now, at the time I was working, I was doing hair, and I had my little career in hair going. I was Miss Hairdresser, Miss Cosmetology. And so I'm just like, where are you getting this from? Because I work and take care of my children. And so it was like something that they kept telling themselves so that they would be okay coming at me crazy. Now, keep in mind the story I just told you. I had 2 children that I was raising alone. Their fathers were not contributing, so I'm not getting any child support. And some of the reasons I suspect I wasn't getting any child support, I can go in at a later date, because I kind of wonder if this church had something to do with it. So I'm listening to them, and so they were like, some stuff can sound really, really good to some people. Just because it sounds good to some women doesn't mean it sounds good to every woman. So the whole traditional husband, I've heard a number of women talk about wanting a traditional husband. So a traditional husband is a husband that goes out and works and brings home his money and pays all the bills. And that's one of those things. If you're working and you're taking care of yourself, and like I said, unlike Chris Rock's mama, you don't have a man who's you don't have the ability to say to your boss, I don't have to take this because my husband has 2 jobs. That can sound good. The devil can make anything sound good. However, they kept saying it to me, and I was like, well, what if I don't want to give up my job? You know what I'm saying? What if I still want to be able to work outside the home, especially once my kids got in school? So I was like, and this church just never would ever directly communicate stuff with me or allow me and the person to talk to one another. It was always them intervening. And I have a real problem with that. Because when you are in the getting to know you stage, that is when you are supposed to be discussing your values and what you want in a marriage, and whether or not you want children, or whether or not you have children, and what you believe about how household duties should be panned out. And I'm a person, because of what I saw growing up, I saw women who worked. So all my aunts had jobs outside the home. Even those, and most of them had children. Okay, so during the dating process, during the getting to know you process, that is when you're supposed to be discussing all that. And so I listened to, and I'm saying even in church, okay, y'all act like y'all don't talk about nothing. It's just next thing you know. And the bad thing is when you have a situation where a man appears to like you, and you're not all of a sudden now not even given a choice as to whether or not you want to be bothered. So I'm like, okay, isn't that a situation for me and my spouse to discuss? I'm not understanding why all of you are involving yourself in a conversation that should be happening between the two people. Okay, so it's like and so I figured it out at one point, and I was like, well, the Holy Spirit kind of gave me a little bit of sensitivity in that area. And it was like, well, he said to one of the people that he wanted a traditional stay-at-home wife. And because that's what he said about what he wanted, he didn't want no ready-made family. And so I wasn't thinking about it no more. I'm like, all right, well, whatever. And the next thing I know, I'm hearing that I'm looking for a man to take care of me. Okay, so let me give you the breakdown on traditional males. Most traditional guys want a traditional wife. My uncles were, at the time that I was coming up, sorry about that, my uncles were, fit that trope of traditional guy as far as going out, working, and making sure that their families were taken care of. However, their wives still worked. And why they worked would depend on the household that you're talking about, because you're talking about 7 men. Okay, my mother had 7 brothers. So you're talking about 7 men with seven distinctly different households and different budgets, different mortgages, different bills. So whatever the reason the woman was working would depend on that household. Now, did any of my aunts quit jobs because they could afford to? 1 or 2 did. Okay, one did, and she wound up going ahead and, started doing hair out of her household to bring in extra money. She also sold Avon. She also went to the school board and decided to become a study hall monitor. Okay, and that did a little something there. Another one was a nurse's aide. I can't remember what the one aunt did, but like all of them worked. All of them held down some type of job. All of them worked. And so when I heard this, I'm like, I don't know if staying at home and being a housewife is for me. Do you see what I'm saying? So when I have to hear somebody accuse me of looking for a man to take care of me, my mind is like, okay, you need to be specific about what you mean, take care of me. Because like I said before, I'm a single mom. I'm raising 2 children alone. I'm the one being financially responsible for everything that goes on and taking care of my children. I had a lot of support from my mother. Was my biggest support system when it came to helping me with my kids. But other than that, and my dad helped me out a lot. When you're a mom, and even if you have, like my grandmother was a big support to my uncles and their wives. They had a lot of support. They had a lot of support staying together. They had a lot of support raising their children. They had a lot of support on both sides because my aunts, had people on their side who were helping them out as well. So when I hear people, say stuff like when I hear men always accusing, and especially in the Black community, I'm like, When I constantly have to hear that women are looking for people to take care of them, I'm like, you have to explain what you mean by take care of a person. Like, you have to make that plain, because, not very many women, where are these women who are looking for men to take care of them? And where are these men who are providing this care? Okay, I'm gonna say a point here. The overwhelming majority of survival sex that is going on in the Black community is being done by Black men. I want that point to rest. So when you as a woman have to hear men do all this accusing, no, girl, look around you. Be aware of your surroundings. If you want to be streetwise, the first clue to being streetwise is to pay attention to your surroundings. Don't be gaslit. Don't be played with. Pay attention to what is actually going on, and not just what men are filling your ears with. There was a article, and I'm gonna find these articles and pull them up and then have them ready for Monday after dark, to talk about. And keep in mind that a lot of this is information that's coming out of the divest community as well. So there was an article. They had a Black couple, and the man, they got together. I think it was like, he finally took her out on the third date. So he canceled 2 dates. He took her out on the third date, and when he took her out, they had Popeye's chicken in a parking lot somewhere. Right. And so I'm like, okay, just the way that they made the whole entire thing, and of course the dude was Black, the way they made the whole thing sound, and then they finally wound up getting married. And so we went into this thing of how he didn't have to do a whole lot to get her. Okay. Now, let me say this. I'm not a person who feels like you should make anybody jump through hoops just because you can, because I'm not a hoop jumper myself. But when you hear these men give these testimonies, and it's really what you call a backhanded, it's not really a compliment. It's what it really is, an insult. It's an insult in disguise. In other words, and the one lady said, well, he may as well have said he hit it on the first night. And I'm like, I think that a lot of men don't know how to date anymore. Or they know how to date and they just don't want to put in any effort to get next to women anymore. I don't know what your problem is. But when I see stuff like what I'm seeing, and then I see the Psychology Today article, I'm like, well, I can kind of see why you're lonely, because nobody wants to put up with all of this craziness that you keep bringing and approaching them with. Like I said, I have a 90-second rule. If you can't even hold a decent conversation without going into some inappropriate area, we can't talk. And I ain't talking about pretending either. It's terrible out here in these streets. And I think that many of the married pastors and the people who are in ministry have been with who they've been with so long, it's been so long since they've had to deal with some of these singles issues, that you're not paying attention to the fact that there are people in your church that may need your help. If you want to be a help, and if you want to be a positive help, no arranged marriages, please. Okay? If the solution to the thing that you are saying is a problem is worse than the problem, then you haven't come up with a solution. Because that's not a solution. Making things harder on women who are already working and already providing for a family, or just working, period, or you have enough on your plate as a woman without somebody making your way even harder. And if somebody is doing what it takes to make your way harder, they don't need to be there. So I'm going to go ahead and get off here. It's been like 50, I'm looking at 55 minutes. I don't want to be before you long. I'm going to talk about this some more on Monday at midnight. So you guys enjoy your weekend. Have fun. Party safely. Don't imbibe too much. Don't imbibe to the point where it takes you over your legal limit. Drive safely so that nobody pulls you over and nobody has to get a call in the middle of the night. And I will talk with you guys later. That's me kissing you guys good night. And Monday night, I'm going to try to be a little more organized so I can really talk about this thing with a great deal of depth for you. So you guys have a good one.